Today, we are to continue from what we've been dealing with over a month now, the microorganisms. Don't be surprised that we are doing so much on microorganisms. Microorganisms are enormous. They are found everywhere. They are seen everywhere, though they are mostly can be seen with our eyes, except with the use of light microscope, electron microscope, as we have talked before. We've described the nature of bacteria, virus, and fungi. So this junction now we'll be looking at how can we even grow our own microorganisms, and the growth of microorganisms is referred to culturing. When we want to grow microorganisms, we say we are culturing microorganisms. So the topic for us today is culturing of microorganisms. What are the concepts? It's not something we can just say we want to do. It requires a lot of procedures, a lot of techniques. Seriously, technical know-how is one of the major things everyone needs to understand before he or she can say he or she is culturing microorganisms. So today we'll be looking at microorganisms and how to culture them. That's what we are learning today, how to culture microorganisms. So let's move on with the slide. You'll be able to understand some concept of this culturing of microorganism. So what are the instruments? Before we say we want organisms, we need to know that there are some tools that we need to make use before we can culture microorganism. Culturing of microorganism can only be done in the lab, not just lab. It has to be aseptic lab. What will let us aseptic? A condition free from germs. Do you know that we can achieve that? We will sterilize, fumigate if possible. We'll make sure that we stop all air into the lab and make sure we clean all the surfaces in the lab. And even all these instruments we're about to list out, we have to make sure that we sterilize them. It is compulsory because, like we have said before, microorganisms are found everywhere. So if you say you want to culture bacteria, and on the surface of the material you have before, you have a lot of other microorganisms. At the end of the day, your result will not give you only bacteria. You have a lot of people or organisms on the petri dish you've worked on. So let us see the materials we use in culturing. So the first one here is microscope, because at the end of the day, whatsoever you have cultured, you should be able to check under the microscope to see in the shape, the pattern, and every necessary thing for you to say, okay, this is a particular bacteria. Don't forget, we said bacteria have four shapes, so these shapes can be easily seen with the aid of microscope. Another instrument to be used is petri dish. We are going to make use of petri dish as many as possible. So we need to pack petri dish and sterilize the petri dish before we start our work. The next one is test tube. We are going to make use of test tube, especially when we are about to make the mixture of our agar. We will be talking about agar. Even in your nose, you see something called agar. So the agar is like a powder that we need to dissolve in water and boil to turn to pap like in nature, because this is what we call the nutrient agar. Is a particular medium that we are going to introduce the source of microorganism we want to culture to. So the next thing is light. We need a lot of light to pick sample of what we have cultured when we want to observe under the microscope. We need cover slip that we need to cover the mouth of our test tube when we are trying to boil or take it to incubator. So hand lens is also required. We need it to be viewing things around our premises. Inoculating loop or needle. This is used to pick the source of microorganisms when we are trying to introduce it into the nutrient agar we have prepared. So the needle you will use to pick up the germs into the medium is what we call inoculating loop. So the next one, there is inoculating chamber, where you are going to place whatsoever you have prepared, whatsoever you have introduced into, whatsoever you will introduce into your prepare solution, you will have it together. You will still have so many that we'll be talking about. We have pressure cooker and the rest, incubator also, because whatsoever you have prepared in the lab, you still need to put it in the incubator so that you can observe the growth of the bacteria we said we wanted to culture. So let's move on. So the next thing we are looking at now is how to culture bacteria. So the steps now, how to culture bacteria. What are the steps? Number one, the culture solution. So the first thing here is to prepare agar. So the culture solution is called agar, like I have said before, we call it agar. And this agar is being prepared under sterilized condition. What are sterilized condition? The lab that I said it should be in aseptic condition. So how do you even prepare this nutrient agar? To prepare nutrient agar is this: you have to suspend 28 gram of nutrient agar powder. I told you agar, we have the nutrient agar in powder form. You have to take this particular gram, you measure it on your weight balance, pick 28 gram, and you will now dissolve it in distilled water of 1 liter. This 28 gram will be dissolved or suspend in 1 liter of distilled water. We are going to make use of distilled water in this experiment. So you have to take it to your precious cooker where you are going to boil it to a particular degree. At the end of the day, you will now take it out and you make sure you sterilize by covering it inside a maybe conical flask or your petri dish and cover the mouth so that nothing will be able to contaminate it. So this is the first stage. We have to prepare our agar, and this is how to prepare agar now. All right, the next step. So the next step is that we have to boil and pour that nutrient agar into petri. So the second stage now is to boil and pour the nutrient agar into sterilized petri dish. I told you every material we are using here, we need to sterilize them. So that nutrient agar we prepare, that I said it can be in a conical flask or test tube, we now pour the content into petri dish. And one thing that we must do is that we pour and cover immediately so that the little air in the lab will not contaminate our work. So let's try to see this image to see what I'm talking about. So this is the petri dish now, is covered. So this is the inoculating loop I talked about. You have to cover immediately. This content that has pink color is the nutrient agar that had already been poured in this. You can see they call it agar jelly that had already been poured in the petri dish. So this one now explains what will happen at the end of the day. So this diagram shows us what will happen when we actually finish this work. So this is the step 2. Whatsoever we've done in 1, we pour it into petri dish and we make sure we cover it immediately. Next step, number 3, is that we allow that jelly we pour in the petri dish to cool, and we still make it cover. We won't open it. It's hot stuff that we just prepare. At the end of it, we now make sure this is it. Is pouring that jelly he has prepared into the petri dish, and you can see where he placed the cover, the cover of the petri dish so close to the petri dish. And something is here. This one is the Bunsen burner that will be emitting heat around this environment so that no microorganisms will be able to contaminate what we are doing. That's why when we are looking at precaution, we see that there are many things you shouldn't do if you are carrying out these experiments. So the third one is we allow it to cool off before we proceed to the next step. So the next step now is that you will use a heat sterilizer like Bunsen burner to kill the microorganism in the petri dish so that nothing will be able to affect what you are doing. So you can see now this is the Bunsen burner, this is the heat sterilizer, and you are passing it around your petri dish so that no foreign body will contaminate what you are doing. Even you as a person, you make sure you put on your glove You wear your nose mask and you not allow the petri dish by opening the petri dish slightly. You introduce it and cover immediately. This is what we call inoculation. You are introducing the bacteria into the medium you have prepared in the petri dish. Are we together now? So that is the next stage. And when you are doing this, your source of life will still be somewhere around here so that no foreign body will be able to contaminate what you are doing. So the next thing here is that you have to place the petri dish in a warm but dark compartment or incubator. When you have covered it, you have sealed it with your maybe paper and the what you do next is that you take that petri dish into the incubator. Why do we take it to incubator? This is an example of incubator. You can see a lot of petri dish have been stored there, and it's going to stay here for like 3 to 4 days in some cases. The reason for this incubator is to monitor the growth of the bacteria we have introduced into this petri dish. So after we have inoculated the bacteria from our tongue into the petri dish, we cover immediately and we place it in the incubator for growth to occur. So what do we do next? We now start observing and start keeping record of whatsoever we are seeing for 2 to 3 days. After the first day, you open the incubator, you bring it out, you check whatsoever you see, write it down. Whatsoever you see, if you notice any growth, write it down. If nothing you're seeing, you also write it down. So at the end of the third day, this is what is expected to be seen. These are microorganisms, and this can also be bacteria because we are seeing some shape. So this shape now is one of the things we can use to classify what we have seen here. Sometimes it will not be the same pattern of growth you will see. It might be rod-like, it might be circular, it might be spirulate, it can be common. So depending on what you see, you now take sample of any of these on your slide and place it under the microscope to be able to view better. So this is how we actually culture microorganisms in the lab. It is essential we understand these steps. In your note also explain further. In your note, I put the precautions there. What do you need to do? You must make sure you wash your hand. You must make sure you sterilize the material. You must not allow a sick person to be part of the experiment. There must be an adult that will coordinate the work. You must ensure you have aseptic environment. I told you the meaning of aseptic environment. One that is covering sneezing should not be allowed to be part of this experiment. And you make sure you sterilize every material you are using in this experiment if you want to get a positive result. So this is about a kind of steps in how to culture microorganism. So you can culture microorganism on your own, but be careful how would you even get the aseptic environment out of. But when we resume to school, I'll make sure we have some time to look at this in our lab. Thank you.